Welcome to Ghost of the Coast, Volume 7, starring Rattlesnake Dre, Kyle Crosby of Louisiana Dread, and Blake Tauzin.
You ever find bones or anything like that?
Yeah. There's one field I could take you. Every year they plow it, there's broken bones that are just kind of on top of the ground. But what's really creepy is I've dug on that field before, and I showed you the musket ball. It's white. Mm-hmm. Well, I dug a hole and I saw something white, thinking it was a musket ball because I dug 200 on that property, and it was a human tooth.
Oh, that's got to be weird.
Yeah.
Like such an eerie feeling.
Yeah, I quickly dropped it. I covered it back up and I said a little prayer. And I was like, you know what? That's enough for today. I'm going to go home on that note.
Like, it's got to be so surreal being in a spot like that, you know, knowing what took place and what you might find.
Right. And on that location, they had over 200 people that got killed from both sides. And the Confederates lost that battle. So most of their guys were killed.
Was that close by?
That was at the crossing.
Okay. Yeah.
And the women and children of the community had to go and bury those soldiers. When you bury somebody, how deep do you bury them?
6 feet.
Right. Women and children weren't digging 200 graves at 6 feet. They just dug just deep enough, I would think, to bury those. Right. Yeah. That's why they're coming up. And that's why I see it's a preservation site, but they're actively farming it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's a preservation site, but they're still profiting, still farming it,
right?
Still tearing it up.
Why should I get kicked off of that property if I'm not harming their sugarcane or anything?
I wonder if it's private owned or if it's
it's private owned, and
out.
then they lease it out to a company to farm it.
Okay.
But a while back I was kicked off that property. I had permission from one brother, and another brother showed up, and he was not happy. Not happy. Yeah, I think he had a pistol on him.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, I wasn't sticking around to find out. I was just like, hey, look, I'm digging up pottery and bullets. Right. I'm leaving. You'll never see me again.
Lower Valley's still like that, too, in a lot of places, though, because it still functions as a farm. They're still doing cane.
Right.
So, and they still have the shop.
And I don't, by the way, I don't trespass. I don't go any place that I don't have permission.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Well, it's wild here because a lot of places you would think, you know, as public or open, actually are owned, and they're having a big fight about that now with the waterways. You know, before waterways used to be just open area. Well, back whenever they were claiming land, these landowners would get, you know, deeds to the land and the waterway, you know, and they're having a fight with that. Like, people are calling the cops on fishermen all over if you're in an area that is marked private. So
I don't know how they're going to solve that.
I don't know either.
Like, I like to fish, but that's not my major passion. But I do have friends that really like to fish. And it's weird because the ones that own it are super passionate about, this is my property. Right. And the ones that don't own it are super passionate. It has something to do, like, if it has flowing water, it should be public.
Right. It's flowing water. If they don't dredge it or anything like that. But it's a lot of natural gas companies. One of the biggest resources here, our natural gas industry, all throughout the marsh and the swamp, you know, they have gates on areas that you can't go because they own the pipeline that flows underneath it.
Right.
You know, so they pay taxes on the water and stuff like that. So it wasn't just until recent years, though, that they actually been pushing people out of it. Before, like, people would just do it, but now I think with better technology they can see you and run you out of there.
And follow you with drones.
Yeah.
My little brother lives directly across the bayou from me, and at least 2 or 3 times a week I'll be in my backyard, and then I'll hear a hum, and I look up and he's got his drone like 10 feet above me.
Yeah.
Which is cool because once I start doing some more videos, he's gonna come follow me, and that's gonna add a completely different aspect to the.
That's gonna be cool.
Yeah, that's gonna be super cool.
Yeah, I've never gotten chased with a drone, but you know, people jump in their boat or they'll shoot at you, stuff like that. That's the Cajun way. You know, if we're in the swamp, you know, there's
kick his
no
ass.
rules.
Yeah, kick his ass. Ask him questions later.
Yeah.
You had mentioned gates and stuff, and I wanted to bring up this story you just reminded me of. You know Clovely Road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clovely used to be this a big community that flooded back in the 30s, I think. And it was all levied in, and they started farming the land. And there's a whole town that's underwater.
That's pretty cool.
There's roads. There's still roads that lead down directly into the water, and it's all gated off. It's privately owned, but I would love
to go there. Yeah.
Yeah, in the middle of
who owns it.
I think it's a family that lives in France.
How fortunate.
Yeah,
You
because
know?
I was actually out there metal detecting one day, and somebody pulled up, and luckily I had permission from somebody that leased it. But they were like, "You have permission?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have permission. I can show you the text message." And he's like, "The guy that owns this is in France." And I'm like, But I had
Bonjour.
permission. Yeah. Yeah. It's none of your business. Don't worry about it until you have permission. But that would be cool. Like during the summer, I know the water gets really clear there. And if you can go like scuba dive underwater and just go kind of look at that town.
Scuba diving in Louisiana just doesn't
No.
appeal to me.
Yeah. Too many snakes
Dude,
and alligators.
Just, you don't know what you're going to run into. You just, no, I'm good.
And
And you can't see. Most of
no.
the time the water just looks like chocolate milk.
Only in the summertime does it clear up in a few places.
But it still would be pretty cool. You know, underwater camera or something like that.
That
Do you
would-
have any equipment to detect
I have,
underwater?
yeah, I have one metal detector. I can go like 30 feet underwater with it.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
but I mean, I would just love to go and explore that. Like, I couldn't imagine going and seeing, because supposedly there was tractors, houses, cars, buses, all left because they had a matter of hours to get out once the levee had broke.
See, and that's kind of, I remember before we had talked about how people are buying up ribbon strip, like shaped properties along Bayou Lafourche. And one of the biggest stipulations for these property owners was to build their own parts of their levees. You know, so they were basically barricade themselves in. It was a narrow strip, but it could go, you know, it was pretty deep. So they would get the bayou front, Bayou Lafourche, and then they would get the back marsh side as well. But they had to maintain all of the land around it.
And that's why there's so many different places you can go metal detect along Bayou Lafourche, because, like you said, those ribbon strips were long and narrow. So they put their house in the front and they'd form all the back. So I could check one spot. I could walk, 400 feet in either direction and maybe hit another settlement or another house.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Because it wasn't all plantations. They had a bunch of, small families that would, they would form a very small strip of land. I guess that's where the sharecropping came in. If somebody owned a lot of it.
Actually, yes, to talk about this, I'm glad you brought this up. So I got a friend of mine, real good friend, from Lavityville. So a few years back, his grandmother passed away. She raised him. And now his grandfather's ill. He's having to move in with a family member. So his grandfather worked on a sugarcane farm his whole life. They raised this family there, all three generations, his grandkids. So now that he's ill, they were clearing out the house. He had just come down like last weekend. They're clearing out the house, and I'm like, dude, what you gonna do with your house? Like with your grandfather's house, y'all clearing this out, or y'all gonna sell it? He's like, no, this is actually going back to the farm owner. I was like, what you mean? He was like, well, my grandfather had a deal with the owner of this farm that he'll build the house and he'll live on his land and he'll work the farm his whole life. So his grandfather never really left the Lavityville area to do anything. Like he just, he lived, raised his family, did the typical Cajun life, hunting, fishing, and stayed in that area. He had a job right behind him. But now it's going to be passed on to a new set of workers for the field.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it's
So
kind of like the sharecropping thing. To an extent, though sharecropping was kind of backwards for the people doing the labor.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was.
They worked very, very hard for very little and ended up with no land.
Yep. It's almost like a legal way of
slavery.
Yep.
And that's what I had to research a little bit about.
Yep.
And basically, correct me if I'm wrong, so sharecropping is someone owns all the land, they'll give you the right to farm the land, and you have to give them like a huge percentage, and they let you keep a very small amount.
So, like, let's say, yes. So, say there's a plantation, Laura Valley. Laura Valley is still owned. They still own the farm. They still own the plantation and the goods that it's going to produce. But their slaves, who are now free people, still lived in that area, still worked those fields, but were legally free. So what the plantation owner would do is he would go and charge them for the land, the rent, the food, and any goods that they sold on the plantation marketplace. Right. So in turn they would actually end up owing money after, and they would get percentages of the yield. So they would end up owing money to the plantation owner by the end of the year when it was time to get their cut. So it was keeping them slaved. Right.
Because they had no other choice.
Yes.
They didn't make enough money to go buy another piece of land, or
kind of trapped them.
And that's what's really crazy is sometimes I'll find like a seated dime or a V nickel, and that was a full day's pay in the 1800s. So when I find those in those fields, sometimes that was a whole day of work that somebody lost. It's basically the equivalent of finding $100 bill today. And a lot of people question, like, how do you go in this field and find all these different things? Like, is people really losing it? The problem is they didn't have lawnmowers back then. Their yards were maybe knee-high with grass at best. So if you dropped a coin or any type of little artifact, the chances of you finding it again were slim to none.
You were not finding it. And there were a lot of workers here. And, talking about, like, with the sharecropping and all, the whole famous, Thibodeau massacre, that happened over a union dispute because the African Americans, the ex-slaves, were fighting to be able to unionize, as a worker group, and they didn't have that. That wasn't available at this time, so they started fighting back against the sugarcane farmers and some of the whites that gathered to go on the shooting spree, because basically what it is, they shot like 200 people, roughly, give or take, and killed a lot of African Americans to stop them from uprising to become their own, like, federally recognized union labor group. And
I think that was like one of the biggest massacres in the United States for a long time.
I think still.
Really?
Yeah.
And then they don't know where that mass grave is because they dug a big hole and buried everybody in it.
Yep.
That would be a really good
little expedition to find.
Oh my God. You'd make national news,
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, there's no exact location. It's just around.
I heard rumors it was on Devil Swamp Road.
I've heard those rumors too. We call it Brunet area, around Bull Run Road. You know where I'm talking about? Going towards Gibson, through where Blake's Po' Boys is, off of Talbot. So you go down that road all the way, and it's gonna come to a T. Take a left and go straight to the swamp. There's two sugarcane fields on both sides. One side is developed, the other sides are wide open. That's where I heard it was happening. But people say all kinds of stuff.
And stories get lost. In history.
Yeah.
That's why I go out there and I try to find all these little clues to, try to solve some of them.
I've found spoons before in Laura Valley, just playing around with one of the houses, like in their yard. One of them burned down, like when I was in high school. So we went play in the dirt one time in the middle of the night until the cops came.
Is Laura Valley haunted?
Some people say yes. That there. So one of the stories I've always heard growing up is you can drive down Laura Valley during the night, because it's when all the kids do it is during the nighttime, right? So, and you can look into the slave houses that that are on the roadside, and you can see spirits sometimes, and sometimes you can hear things through there on this side. Now, you go further down Laurel Valley Road, and there's this bridge. It takes you to Choctaw, which is the backside of Chack Bay. On this bridge, supposedly a kid was killed riding a bike, and you can sometimes see her during the nighttime.
Jesus.
But slave-wise, that's all I've heard for the slave town, was that you can see them sometimes in their homes.
Kid ghosts are the worst.
Yeah.
I'd rather see a full-grown big ghost than a little tiny kid.
Yeah, especially, riding a little bike. So, I mean, imagine, as kids, we would go, well, when I was in high school, that's really when I would play around Laurel Valley during the night, because we would go race our cars, through the swamp and, do things we shouldn't be doing. But it's always very eerie riding through the slave area during the nighttime. Like, it's just a weird feeling, And plus, the swamp is very eerie as well. I mean, just to be in the middle of the swamp during the night is kind of... I don't know how much you've been in it, but it's pretty intimidating.
I lived in Thibodaux for like 3 or 4 years when I was going to Nichols, and we went there, and we went to... I think it's in Chack Bay. They had an old church. It's fallen since. But we went ride through Laurel Valley, and it is definitely creepy. Mm-hmm. I mean, anytime it's completely dark, there's no lights back there. It is really, really strange. And sometimes it'll be, depending on what time of the year it is, it'll get dark early, and I'll be in the middle of those fields digging up, like you said, sometimes human remains. They have pieces of bone and stuff, and that they had battles and people's lives are lost almost directly where you're standing, and it is extremely, extremely creepy.
It is. See, they just paved that road a few years ago. When I was growing up, that was gravel the whole way, so it made it worse. Like, the road
I'm sure
was
with the
horrible.
dust.
Yeah, it was horrible. So, but yeah, Laurel Valley has definitely a place here in Thibodaux. Like, for me as a kid, that's where it was. Either we were going, if we wanted like a scare, to get that scare, it was either we were going to Laurel Valley or we were going to the Bruley, going to look for the Bruley monster, which is this just narrow road and swamp, thick swamp around you. No cell phone service, anything.
What is the Bruley Monster? I've never heard of that.
The Bruley monster? That's like the Rougarou.
Gotcha.
This area calls it the Bruley monster. Yeah.
I never knew about that.
No? You've been back there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sucks because you can't really get back there unless if you have a hunting lease, because there's hunting back there and there's natural gas. So the people kind of know each other that are back there, but I mean, you can get on the levees and just go for miles throughout the swamp and all, and just sitting there listening to some of the sounds you hear in the middle of the night in the swamp is, like I said, it's intimidating. You hear birds, like owls. You hear stuff splashing in the water. You hear frogs. You're getting eaten by mosquitoes. It's just pretty. It can be very scary just being out there.
I can only imagine. I've gone metal detecting a couple times at night just because with work and stuff, you just don't have that much daylight. And there's a definite difference when you're walking out into a field during the day, and you walk back to your car, you clean off everything and throw it in your car, and then you're leaving a field and it's pitch black dark, and you're like, let me get to my car and get the hell out of here.
What's tied to these items that I just found? What kind of voodoo you're going to have on you?
I have a whole room full of this stuff, and a while back it was kind of creepy. Now I think it's kind of leveled off, or I just don't hear anything. But right in the beginning, when I was putting all this stuff in my room, I would hear stuff like in my own house, especially when you'd walk in the room. Super weird.
Is it an older house or
no? It's
a newer house?
It's a modern house, but I have like 200-year-old bullets and stuff related directly to war. Some of those bullets are all like mushroomed out. They definitely hit somebody.
Yeah, that's so. It's like your little antebellum room. You know,
It is
like
crazy,
what kind of
yeah.
evil is gonna come across me today?
Yeah. It's I think that's why my wife wants me to put it in the man cave outside, get it all out of the house.
Yeah, it can definitely bring in a certain energy with it. You know, that can make you feel uncomfortable. Like, I grew up in an old house. My grandmother's house was a bar room back in the early 40s, and then they added on, the neighborhood developed and stuff like that. So that house, you can walk in and you can feel something like it's just off, right? So later after high school and stuff, I grew up there. I've been there probably since 10. So around high school time, you know, some weird stuff started happening around the house. And my grandmother would tell me she would wake up in the middle of the night and see this man standing over her, you know, and he would stand there and he would just, you know, he would walk. There's like, the bar is still in the house. Like, the part that was the bar, the original bar and everything is still in this house, you know. So it's just, you would hear stuff when facial recognition started happening. You take pictures and it would tag stuff on the wall, like, are you this person? Are you this person? Like, dude, you can see and get
Yeah,
goosebumps.
I see that.
And I never really like so much. It's just an energy, a negative energy in this house altogether. Like, you walk in and you can feel it. And I never really was that person to like give into stuff like that. You know, I was just like, oh, whatever, there's an explanation for all of this. You know, it's an old wooden house, you know, stuff like that. Well, you know how they say kids are a little bit more sensitive to these things and all. So we had this girl that was staying with us in the apartment, in the house. I'm like, my apartment? No. So it was my ex-wife's daughter, sister. Anyways, she was staying with us for a little while. She was probably like 5 years old, okay? And she would always wake up in the middle of the night and talk in her sleep. It was the creepiest thing, you know, to really see people sleepwalk. It's pretty creepy in general, you know. So she would wake up in the middle of the night and just start having these conversations, you know, and I can hear her from the room next door, you know. And it wasn't until a few years later that she told me that she had seen a man in the house and a young girl, you know. And I was like, that's so weird, you know, because my grandmother mentioned the man, you know, but...
And what else is weird is that's a 5-year-old child. So for their brain to even register that, it's hard for them to just, you know, make that up. That something was going on.
About it,
right,
you know?
right.
So ever since then, I always question, like, when she'd wake up in the middle of the night talking, I'm like,
who's she talking to?
Yeah, is she really talking to someone?
Thanks for listening to Ghosts of the Coast, a DSR production.